I've done a talk similar to this a few times, not live, and it's always been like a 25-minute talk. So today is going to be live and twice as long, and we may attempt some live demos, so bear with me. I think it'll be fun. The primary thing I'd like to get out of this is to hear from y'all whether you think that this is something that would actually be useful to you in your roles or to the people that you work with. I think it's really cool and I think it could be useful, but like it doesn't really matter what I think at the end of the day. So I'd love to hear from you all afterward. I'll be around today and tomorrow with your thoughts, even if your thoughts are, I don't like it. So that's where we'll go with this. So I'm Jan Kleinert. I am a developer advocate with Google Cloud. I lead a team of advocates that work on databases and compute, which is an odd marriage of technologies. This is my Twitter handle if you want to get in touch. And this is my pandemic hair. That is my pre-pandemic hair. So what we're going to talk about today is database observability for developers, like what I even mean by that. What are some of the problems that developers face when it comes to troubleshooting, issues with databases. I'll introduce an open source library called Sql Commenter to you, talk a little bit about what it is, what it's trying to accomplish, and how it works, and how you can use it. We may have a live demo, and if that doesn't work out, I've got a recorded video that we can watch together of me doing it. And then I have some resources, and we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So the reason that this all kind of came to be is that, you know, especially if these days where folks are responsible for like a lot of parts of the application stack, sometimes database troubleshooting falls on the shoulders of developers who may or may not have database expertise. You know, I am not a database expert. You know, some of that in-depth troubleshooting and what tools to use and you know, what to enable to be able to get access to what I need in the logs is not always something that I'm going to know. And, you know, our teams believe that that's probably the case for a lot of developers out there. And, you know, with all of these microservices-based applications, it can become this web of confusion when you're trying to figure out, you know, which query in the database came from which service and why and what interacted to get you to that point. Thought I had another slide there, but we're just going to go with it. So, you know, when we're working with ORMs, which is often the case, you know, it provides a lot of ease of use. As a developer, you don't have to think about crafting those SQL statements. The ORM is going to do it for you, and it kind of provides that translation layer. There's lots of arguments for or against ORMs. I'm not really here to do that. But one of the things that can be challenging when you're working with ORMs is figuring out, like, how do you associate a particular query with the piece of code in your application? It's just not easy, is our premise, at least. So what the team that built Sql Commenter is trying to do, and to be clear, like, I am not one of the people who built Sql Commenter. I'm working with it and supporting it in the ecosystem, but so you won't hurt my feelings if you have feedback about it, is to take, you know, the vision of open telemetry and bring it to databases. So what if we could do this with a standard format to take, you know, application tags, so like what action, what route, what controller, what, you know, database engine or whatever is being used, and send that and traces into the database via the logs. And if we had a standard format for this, then APM tools, so things like Dynatrace or Datadog or Splunk could ingest these logs with this information, and then developers could use that to hopefully more easily troubleshoot their applications. So that's kind of what we're going for with Sql Commenter, is to get that standard in place, open source it so that it's not some, you know, vendor-specific thing, and then help make people's lives easier around database performance. So yeah, that is what Sql Commenter is meant to be, to extend the vision of databases to open telemetry. And the way that it works, this looks like a mess. I'll explain it in more detail in a minute, but basically it takes information about your application, tags, key value pairs, and open telemetry trace context, and inserts that as comments into your SQL statements, so you can see that in your logs. A couple months ago, it was like, I think mid-September, Google donated Sql Commenter to open telemetry. That is still in process. So you'll find the GitHub repos not yet fully in the OpenTelemetry project, but we're working on it. But the goal there is basically to, open this up to the ecosystem, hopefully get more people contributing, and not have it just be a Google thing, because it's really about the broader set of databases and tools and technologies. All right, so SQL Commenter, it is an open source library. The primary benefit today is with the supported ORMs, because we have these integrations that if you're using one of the 8 to 10 ORMs that are supported, it will just auto-instrument these queries for you. You add whatever package support you need, and you put a couple lines of code in your application, and then it just works. And it's actually pretty easy, so there's not a ton of application code change that has to happen to instrument this. And the repo is, oh, you can't see my mouse. The repo currently is here. It's going to be moving, as I mentioned, to the OpenTelemetry space. That's where work will be going forward, but right now it's go to this one until it's fully propagated over there. So what do we support today? So 4 languages today: Python, Java, Node.js, and Ruby. A whole bunch of frameworks that I won't read through for you, but you can see them all there. A couple that we might look at in examples would be Django and Connects. And then it supports, all of these databases here are ones that we've tested against. So we know it works with Postgres, MySQL, MariaDB, SQLite, and Cloud SQL, the flavors of, I think it should work with all types of Cloud SQL, whether it's SQL Server, Postgres, or MySQL, though I haven't tried it with SQL Server myself. However, when we look at some of the integrations, I'll show you that there are some features that we have added into Cloud SQL to really take advantage of some of what SQL Commenter gives you that aren't yet supported by other database engines, but they could be. And we hope to, help make that possible in the future. But I'll show you what that looks like when we get there. Okay, so this is the format. I wish I could walk over here and point at things. So this is how these comments are structured. So if you have this, select star from students, not a very complicated query there, but you can see within these comments that we have a bunch of key value pairs. And that is the format of the comments that SQL Commenter injects. So there's a whole algorithm, a whole specification that we could look at. I'm going to talk through some of the most important parts, but basically it's the SQL statement followed by this comment. These key value pairs have to be comma separated, URL encoded, and then they have to be sorted in lexicographical order, which sounds fussy, but it's primarily very well defined so that if you are using, a tool that wants to pull this information back out, it's predictable, and you can actually, write an algorithm to deal with those comments in an expected way. So all of that, including pseudocode for the different pieces of the algorithm, are here on this page in the documentation. But basically what we're looking at here in this case, you can see there's the action, the controller, and the framework. And then we have this OpenTelemetry, that's a really hard thing to say, trace context that is added in there too. That part is optional. You don't have to be integrated with OpenTelemetry or OpenCensus to use this, but it's supported if you are. And so here's a bit of a more full example of what this might look like in one of your logs. So here you've got a log entry for a query that took, let's see, where is it? About 400 milliseconds. We have the SQL statement, and then we have that comment. And so it's showing us that this particular statement was issued from the assign order controller and the demo/assign order route. So if this was a problematic query, and we're like 400 milliseconds is ridiculous, it shouldn't be taking that long, that's where we could go look in our code and see if we can understand what might be going on. So it gives you some clues that you might not otherwise easily find, particularly if you're responsible for this application but you didn't write it and don't know the code base that well. This can be a way of getting some clues. All right, so I'm going to attempt to show you, all of my demos that I typically show are unexpectedly not working as they normally do. So we're going to attempt to do a demo, and if not, I have a fallback to a video of the demo I was going to show you. So let's go over to my other browser and try to make this bigger. How do you do full screen in Firefox? Seems like there it is. All right. So spoiler alert, that's not what I wanted to show you yet. All right, so I have some applications here. Let's open up, I'll show you this in the editor, and if this is too tiny, let me know and I can zoom in. But let's start with a simple node application that's just like a voting app. You vote for tabs or spaces, and it calculates the votes, and you can see all the votes that have come in. So just something really simple where there's not a lot of complicated database action happening, but to show you how you would enable SQL commenter in such an application. All right, so that is in here. This is very small, isn't it? Let's see what we can do. Let's see if that helps. So what I used as a base is just the Cloud SQL Postgres Connects sample code from Google Cloud, because it's just a simple application. And what we did, which I can walk you through how we got to this point. So in the SQL commenter documentation, it has examples for each of the supported languages and frameworks so that you're not trying to put this all together yourself. So if we go down here and look at connects, you can scroll down and see, here's the npm install that I need to run. And then if you're not already using OpenTelemetry or OpenCensus, you may need to include a couple other packages as well. And then there's really just 2 pieces of code that you need to add to your application. So I have done that here in my server.js file. The 2 pieces of code that I added are just this one here. I want to click it and then make it go away. This right there, and then below here, this wrap main connects as middleware. It's also a mouthful. Adding this, and then there's some options you can include, like if you want to include that trace parent, trace state, the route, and the DB driver, you can add which pieces you want to include in those comments here. So for example, if you don't care about the trace parent, trace state information, you could leave that, set it to false, and then just have less stuff going through to your logs. But with that in there, the rest of the application staying as is, that's all we need to do to enable SQL commenter. So I ran this application before so that we'd have logs to look at. We can try and run it now and see what happens. Let me see where we are. All right, and then it's, all right, so we're in here. Let me see. I'm doing this in Cloud Shell, so it's like ephemeral, and I can't remember if it's been open long enough that my authentication proxy is still running. It is not. So let's go find it. Is this the right one? All right, let me just fix my path, and then we'll be ready to go. This is just Cloud SQL things. You could just do this with like Postgres running locally or something like that, but because I wanted to show you Cloud SQL Insights later, I'm doing it this way. Awesome. Got to get rid of that dot. Bear with me. This is also, does anybody remember what you press to go back faster when you're going back? Control. Oh, no. Come back. Oh dear. There we go. It was worth a try. Thank you. I know there's something and I can't remember what it is. Okay. I will practice that in my own time so you all don't have to watch. Okay, so now we have Cloud SQL Proxy running. All right. So now if we, I'll just show you. Okay. Package, JSON. I have already added in the SQL commenter module here. So if we just do npm start, I think this should run. I don't like that. That's too slow. It's not connecting. Oh, it is. Okay, it's just slow. So then we can look at this application and you'll be blown away by the fact that it doesn't work. Awesome. Hold on. I appreciate you all. So yeah, this is what I was afraid was going to happen. So we'll skip that for now and we'll come back to it. But what I'll show you is what we're going to look at anyway, which is in the logs. Basically, This is just a way of viewing the logs from the database, the Postgres logs. Make it a little bigger. So you can search in here. Right now we're looking at logs from a Python app. And what you can see is the information. Let's see if I can make this bigger for you. When you've got SQL Commenter enabled, you can see these comments that are getting added in. So here it's got this create order controller, the database driver, framework, and route. So what's helpful about this, there is some benefit to it just having it in the logs, because you can see, you can associate the code to the queries that are being called if there's something that you're looking for. But what I think can be more helpful even is when you integrate that with, like visualizations. So that is what I want to, oh boy, that's very, very big. Let's bring this back down. And I'll show you this. And let's go 6 hours back. And instances. See which one it was here. So if we look at 6 hours and go to Insights. Bear with me. Okay, so you can see here, like just by looking at this graph, and this is Query Insights or Cloud SQL Insights, which is part of just Cloud SQL implementations. Currently, at the moment, it's supported for Postgres, but like MySQL is coming soonish. And what this is doing is it's integrated into that SQL commenter information that's coming through, but they've built it into this visual interface to make it even easier to look at this information. So you can see here that during this time, there's a bug flying up here, something was happening that was causing a lot of wait. So if we zoom into that time frame and scroll down, this is where it gets interesting. So you can see a list of all of the top queries by whatever criteria you want to look at. Here it's sorted by total time. That may or may not be what you're interested in. You can sort it by other things. And also, that's helpful, but if I have no idea in my application where this query comes from, I'm still kind of stuck a little bit. So that's why we have this tag section, and this is what's pulling in those key value pairs from the SQL commenter comments and showing you the database load and performance by those tags instead. So here I can see, this particular controller and route, although in Django that's not really controller and route, but it's still relatively valid. So the payment charge controller and the demo charge route are resulting in a bunch of load time. So if I click into this, there's also some other parameters that you can see down towards the end. If I click into this, then I can get more detailed information, including sampled query plans. You can click, it's got this one selected, but you can select different ones and see kind of what is more specifically, to drag it like this, more specifically going on. You can get a graph of query latency, database load, and then if you have a bunch of different applications interacting with the same database instance, you can see top users, top IP addresses, things like that, which can also help narrow down problems. But this end-to-end tracing view is also somewhat helpful because a lot of that detailed information will be surfaced here. This is a tiny screen, so you have to scroll a lot to see it. But a lot of that information is here that we have in the logs, but pulled up in context of those queries. So you can, where's my link here? You can go look at it in Cloud Trace. You could also export these logs into whatever APM tools you're using, but it would be up to that APM vendor what, if any, integration beyond viewing the logs would be there. We're hoping that some of the other APM tools out there will integrate this and find ways to make it even more useful for people. But in Insights, this is one way that you can look at it here. So another thing that I want to show you is back in the logs. Let's see if we're getting any cases where the trace context is coming through. I don't recall if that was enabled here or not, but that would be in this text payload. It would contain something about trace. Let's see if we have anything. We may or may not. Not in the last hour, but let's see if we did earlier. Yeah, okay. So here you can see this one, for example, which was also related to that Django application. In addition to the controller, database driver, framework, route, and so on, also had the trace context added in there too. And that allows you to connect some of those dots. Now, I'm really bummed that this app wasn't running, and I would like to get that going. So we're gonna pop over there and see if we can figure it out, because I think it makes a lot more sense when you can kind of follow the pieces. But before I do that, is any of this not making sense or not fitting together? Because I'd be happy to address some questions before diving into the demo and going that direction. Ask it a different way. Does this make sense? Yeah, okay. Cool. So we will live debug then. All right, where's my terminal? Okay, so let's stop this. I think it's authentication issue. Hi, Control C, please. All right, so yes, okay, so this is a modified version of a code lab that we have if you want to try it yourself. Although change needs to be made to the code lab because our wonderful team that handles all the samples has recently updated the sample app to make it easier to run, but the tutorial has not been updated yet that uses it. So I'm gonna handle that tonight. But in the meantime, you can find all the steps that you use to do this here, and I think I need to just copy paste a couple things, some environment variables that I didn't do before. I think this is what it is. So let's do this. So what I'm doing is just setting up my Cloud SQL instance, whose name I can't remember. This is allowing us to do the authentication. Copy. Oh, we're in Insights test. That's the wrong one. Let's go to the right database. Otherwise, it's going to cause us all sorts of trouble. I appreciate you all being patient with me. All right, so here's our instance name. Let's do that again. Get rid of it and put the right one. If you're interested, the format of this is your project ID, your zone, and then the name of your instance. All right, so we have that. Then we need our host. Because I'm running this Cloud SQL auth proxy, I can just put localhost, and it's going to run through there. Then my, DB username and password, I believe. User, password, and name. So let me just double check all of that, because I think that might have been what I messed up before. It's a tiny little screen. Databases. Our database is going to be, I think it's called VotesDB. Yep, there it is. And let me see which users we're using. I think we just have the Postgres user. Yes, okay. It's my super secure database. Obviously, I would not use this method in production. DB name equals VotesDB, DB user, it's Postgres. And shame on me, DB password is also Postgres. Don't do that. All right, so now we have our environment set up. I believe, but I'll go double check, that now we can just do npm start because we have already created this database in the past. Let's try and see if I'm remembering correctly. Come on. That looks better. Let's see. Where's my thing? Come on. Yay! All right. It's very exciting. This was really worth the build-up, I hope. So now we have this where if we are doing votes, and every time you vote, you click this little button because it's telling, I didn't mean to click that. Sorry, go back. I didn't mean to click you. Okay. We'll click some votes, and then I also put another page in here just to give us a little bit of something interesting to look at in the data. And here's where something is going strange. Let's see if it's still not working. What we should see now is that in the logs or in Cloud SQL Insights, either way, when we go to tags in a couple minutes, this runs about 3 minutes or so behind sometimes. We should start seeing, if we've got the right instance here, my instance, and we can filter it just for votes DB because we don't care about that food app anymore. And that one was very noisy. Yeah, we should start seeing these queries coming through from our application. And then what you should see here that you're not, and I've got to figure out why, is you should be seeing at least the route. So at least like / for the main page and / get all votes. For the ones that are coming through there, this used to be the case, and today it is not the case. And in fact, if we look in the logs, it's not there. So I've got to figure out what has gone awry, if it's me or if it's the library or if it's something else. But the DB driver is coming through, so we know it's doing something because that was not there before. So this is a little curious, but let's look at it in the logs anyway. And I'm going to get rid of this here, and we'll run it and then jump to now and see if we can find those. We got a whole lot of junk in here too. That's not it. Let's see. We want log. Here, why don't we try? Whoop. Let me look at what the, it's still text payload. Let's see if we can find it. Text payload contains, let's see, connects, should be in there somewhere. All right, scroll down to the bottom and find something. Yeah, so it's here. Let me make this bigger. Woo! So it's trying to send stuff through, but all that's making it is this DB driver information, which is obviously not what is intended, because if you looked at what we asked it to do in the code, we did tell it we wanted route as well. And so that is not behaving as intended. Now, when you do include like trace parent and trace state, sometimes that ends up being sampled. Depending on what like library you're using, sometimes you can set a sample rate. I'll show you a Django app that we're using for that food delivery app and show you how they're doing that. So it could be the case that maybe it's only sampling like 1 out of every, like 1%, like including trace information, and that if you don't have a really heavily used, like, you know, I can't think of the word I'm looking for. If there's not a lot of queries, you might not see any of that trace information come through except for very infrequently. So if that doesn't work for you, you might need to find a way to have it sample more often. And if you're debugging, you could just set it to like do it all the time. But I'll show you what that looks like over here. Gotta find it. It is in, this is obviously not Uber, but this is what they decided to call it. Is it in here? Let's see. Yeah, so for this one, they have this sampling, probability sampler that originally is set at like 1%, but when I'm running this and I really want to generate a lot of the trace data, I'll set it to like 0.5 or 0.9 or something like that so that I get a lot more. It does add more stuff into the logs, so you probably don't want to do that all the time, but you can see here they're like, it's good to do this for if you're doing local dev. And in the case of this application, the things that ended up getting added to make it work are adding this in here. Similar to what we did with the Node app, you just include that as middleware, the middleware, and then there's one other thing in here somewhere that we would find in our documentation for using the Python stuff. So all of these each of these languages has documentation for the different ORMs or frameworks. It's, some of them are more fully supported than others. So the Ruby one, for example, I'll have to show you in the GitHub repo. You have to put in some work to get it to work, basically, at this point. So in my opinion, I think this is like an awesome start, and I think there's a lot of valuable stuff here already. But what I think will make this a lot better is if we get more people's hands on it, trying it out, telling us what's good, what's easy, what is still too much, too complicated, needs updating. And then also hearing like what's missing that people would really like to see. Like we've already seen folks asking for, I think, .NET support, PHP support, some of these other, I don't know what Celery is, but Celery support, some of this other stuff to get added to. And then there's some things that are just with like, you know, a better user experience. This is not the one. But there was something, for example, like with the node, you had to include some of the open census stuff even if you weren't using it, just because of the way it was set up. Like that's not ideal. So we've got some refinement that needs to happen, and I'm hoping that we'll get more momentum with this now that it's, you know, being donated to OpenTelemetry, and hopefully we'll get some more contributions from the community. So with the time that we have left, which is a lot, I wanted to ask you all, like of these things, one, do you have questions about anything? What would you like to go deeper or talk about, or tell me some of the like things that you're doing where something like this might be helpful, or you're using something that you think is even better? Like I would love to hear from you all if you're doing these types of things. Like what's your experience like? Yes.
You had a slide that kind of showed the syntax that you were adding into a SQL query.
Yeah.
So it was really hard to read. It was like a red font.
Oh, yeah. I sure can.
I'm curious what that actually looks like.
Yes. So let's go to, it's probably easier. Thank you. That's important. I should fix that for the future, first of all. But if we go to the specification and make it, let's see if this is any better. Might be better. Now it's like orange on white, which is okay. So it's basically like you've got, you know, here's your statement, and then here, so it's like a, you know, /*, then you have your key value pairs that are comma separated. So action equals whatever, and this is getting like, you know, included from, like the ORM is doing this work for you in the cases where they've integrated against it. It's adding in or modifying. One complete comment. And if there exists a comment already, it like does it nicely. So it'll take everything that's there, merge it together, and then alphabetize it. Now for each of these things, like if you're actually interested in implementing this, there is a whole lot of information about like, okay, how do you go about escaping meta characters or dealing with those, or handling a key serialization. There's like all the things, how to sort them. And so down here at the bottom, if you keep going, then they put it all together for actually constructing the comments. Similarly, there is how to parse it back out, which of course is important if you're trying to do something with this other than just look at it with your eyes in the log. I think we've gotten a few comments on this part too, about, oh, I can't remember what it now. I think there's like certain edge cases where it could be easier to deal with certain things. But generally this is stable and just the way that it works. Does that answer what you were looking for?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to just see what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's just a comment. It's key value pairs in a comment. It's, that's what I think is kind of cool about this, is like the technology is, the idea is powerful. The, like what's technically being done is not that wild, right? Like it's just trying to get information that you need to you in a way that's useful, hopefully by working well with the tools that you're already using. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Could you show us your database display again that showed these records in the table?
Yes, I think so. So So this isn't exactly records in the table. I'm not sure if this is what you were looking for, but like the queries, was this it? Yeah. Oh, okay, cool, cool.
So SQL commenter is generating that query insert into votes because somewhere in our code we wrote an insert into votes, correct?
So SQL commenter isn't, but the ORM that's being used is what's doing that. So
It's being stored in the database?
this information, this is being pulled from the logs. The Postgres logs in this case, and some information is stored. I can look it up and tell you. Let me do that live so I can give you the full answer.
You say the Postgres log, you mean like the transaction log?
I am not going to pretend to be an expert on that, but I'll show you the log that I'm looking at, which is just this Postgres log here. It's got all, yeah, so in this case, I think we have, what is the flag that's enabled? I don't even have slow query logs turned on, but it's helpful if you do. This is just like log _ statement flag set to all, so that all of the statements get added into the log. I think that's all I've done here. So this is just my Postgres. Like, I feel like I'm not understanding. I'm sorry.
I probably don't know enough to explain it well, but so I've not used Postgres, so it creates a physical text log file for every query that comes through.
Yeah, it's one big log file that's got all of this in it, and you can, by setting.
Human readable, not meant for it to be storing transactions until they get written properly.
Yeah, this isn't like a table in your database. It's literally just a log file.
And SQL commenter is merely appending these key value pairs onto the end.
Yes, so it's at execution, before or at execution time, SQL commenter is injecting these comments so that they go into the log, and then you can see them here. So the comments are what came from SQL commenter. The queries themselves could be handwritten, and you wrote the comments yourself and put something in there that was valuable to you. But in this case, for all the examples I've shown you, it's the ORM. So maybe it's SQL Alchemy in the case of the Django app, or Connects in the case of the Node app that is doing the work of constructing those queries. And then SQL commenter is just integrated with those ORMs to add the comments as well.
So one thing I could see being helpful that
Yeah.
maybe this does and I'm not seeing it is to be able to search on the table name.
Oh. Like in,
Because I know in my DBA, first things he's going to say is, man, our user table is taking forever when we're doing inserts or something. He would want to be able to look at this and go, show me the queries that are running on.
Let's see. Query. I suppose you could, it's literally just showing us all the values. Let's say votes was your, I've never actually tried this, so I don't know what's going to happen. Query, I'm assuming that means contains. This could use a little user interface work here. Interesting. So I think you can do a little bit of filtering. It doesn't look very sophisticated, so that would be helpful. It could, table, yeah, well. It could be.
Somewhere in here I can search on the keys or the values of the key. Right?
Yeah, so you can find that in the tags. I'm trying to think how you could parse. I suppose like the table could get parsed out of the SQL queries, but it's already in there, just not identified as such, if that makes sense. I have to think about it a little bit more. But yes, I can see like those standard things that you are used to thinking about with a query to be able to search by those two makes a ton of sense, particularly over here in this section. Yeah, like this data could be more structured so that you could look at like what are the tables we're talking about. One thing I didn't mention that is important, I think. We talked about action controller, route, database driver, those like standard key value pairs, you can use anything. You could put version, for example, like if you've got a 1.0 version and a like 1.1 and you want to run both of them and just like see if there's any difference in how this is performing, you could have version equals blah be one of the things that goes through. There's no rules to what you can pass through, and you can pass through as many as you want. I don't think that there's a limit to the number of like key value pairs. There might be a limit to the length of like a SQL comment. I'm not sure. That might be a fun thing to try to break and find out. But if you're just doing that and you want to see the data in the logs, you can put whatever you want in there. And I think version, like I've been lobbying for version to be one that's supported like in this interface. Right now, the only things that are supported in the Sql Insights interface are the standard tags. So if you put other stuff, it'll still be there in the logs, but you won't get to see it here. And I think that's a little sad. I think it'd be cool if you could like specify like, here's my custom tags that I want you to pull out because it knows how to do it, and just have them in there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's probably a stupid question, but does the database have to live on the Google platform in order to see this data?
So to see this pretty stuff, yes. But to use SQL Commenter and get it into the logs, no. So that's the thing I don't like that answer right now. Like I don't like having to say like you only get the pretty Cloud SQL Insights with Cloud SQL, but that's where it is today. Like technically it should be possible for, other tools to do something similar. You know what I mean? And I suspect the team would be interested in chatting with folks who are interested in building something like this, whether it's like an APM vendor or whoever, to like talk about how they generally approached it. Because there is some like special sauce going on here to like be able to like associate those query plans with a particular, tagged query and stuff like that. And I think there's value in it. But yes, today the Insights dashboard only works with Cloud SQL, but the SQL Commenter itself is any SQL database. Somebody asked me once if you could use it with no SQL database, and no, you can't. It would be cool, but it's SQL Commenter, so no.
Big girl for me anyway, because I can't move my Kleinert databases anywhere, but it looks awesome.
Yeah, and so
there's no way I would be able to. So maybe by the process of going open source, somebody will.
And that's really what we're hoping. And I know that there's been interest from several of the APM vendors out there to integrate more deeply. But like with everything, it's a process, and I'm sure they've got lots of priorities and stuff. But I think that would be awesome because a lot of times, like you're saying, like you don't really always get a choice of what tooling you use or necessarily where if you're using a managed database versus not. So the more places stuff can be available, the better. So that's why I was like, maybe should I show the Insights dashboard first or show it last? So I try to generally show it later. So you get excited about SQL Commenter in general first, and you're still excited. And then it's not a disappointment.
Right off the bat, hey, this is the query.
Yes. It's so helpful, I know. So I hope that that'll be beautifully available other places in the future too. Yes?
I'm just going to clarify. So the custom tags, when I have multiple apps in the exact same database, I can specify app 1 and 2 as being where the server's getting from inside of comments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so application is actually already a tag. So if you had like, one is the food app and one is this votes app, you could put that as the application tag. You can also have like what's the database user or the name of the database. So there's lots of ways you can distinguish. But yeah, if you had like a bunch of different microservices all talking to the same database, you can use application for that or whatever you want. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it could pull out like the client IP address and stuff too. Like whatever it is that's valuable for you to look at, you can split it that way. So I don't have actual data, but it's supposed to be very minor negligible. I'll show you what it says in the docs, because that is all I can really do. Cloud. Yeah, so I cannot multitask. Performance, storage, I know it's in the documentation somewhere. Oh, which page is it? Performance, there's a little paragraph here. Let's see what we say. Performance overhead is expected to be small. That is not a very useful statement. It uses 12 megs of RAM for a default query string size of 1024 bytes, which is the default. And this is for using it with Cloud SQL Insights. If you're just using SQL Commenter all by itself, that's not what they're referring to here. And it doesn't use, query insights. So the dashboard doesn't like take up any storage space in your like Cloud SQL instance. So you're not like paying extra to store the data to use it or anything like that. So no, I don't think that's the most satisfying answer. Maybe we can get some like benchmarking or something at some point to answer that better. I'm gonna just scroll away from that because that didn't make me feel.
Way to differentiate the comments. So like if some other thing came in after the fact in one of the comments, how do you know which ones are SQL Commenter and which ones? I didn't see any namespacing, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I don't know, that's a good question. I'm not sure what other things are, and I literally just don't know, like what other things add comments to SQL statements, but yeah, namespacing is actually a good thought that I haven't heard anybody talk about, so it's worth a discussion.
If this is a good thing, people may want to start doing this other thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I saw a tool recently, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Facebook. Somebody built something kind of like derived from it, and I haven't had a chance to play with it yet to see like what it's doing. But like that, if other things start kind of like tentacling out of it, then making it not be just a confusing pile of comments would make sense. That's helpful. Cool. All right, and yeah, I really appreciate you all like having a conversation with me about this. I hope it's valuable for you and not just me, but this is what I've been looking forward to doing, is actually talking to people about this and seeing if you're like, no, I'm not interested in that at all, or if there's like some value to it. So sweet, I'm glad. Cool. And all of the questions and stuff you all brought up are great, and I'm gonna bring them back to the team so they can think about it. But I will, we do have more time, but I will plug one more time where is it? I know I have the GitHub repo open. All right, this is where it lives. Oh, that's impossible to see. That's where it lives today. It's moving over to the OpenTelemetry project. There is a stub repo there, but if you actually want a release to play with, this is where you can go. And the docs have all the packages for the different languages. Going back real quick to the end here, I will put these in PDF and put them on Twitter so you can actually get these links. But there's links to some of the documentations to this. Oh, I didn't put the code lab in there. I'll put a link to the code lab. You can follow along the code lab with not Cloud SQL, with just a Postgres database, and just ignore all the Google things and get the SQL Commenter stuff going in your application. I need to just write a plain vanilla SQL Commenter tutorial soon. There is also someone who works at Dynatrace has a podcast episode coming out. I think his podcast is called Is It Observable? Coming out whenever the 11th is. Is that Monday, Friday? Sometime soon. And he wrote a tutorial, I think a Java tutorial that uses just SQL Commenter and Kubernetes, and went through the process of figuring it all out, how to actually use it on his own. So I am curious to hear his journey through that tutorial, but he's publishing that too, so it might be good to look at. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. I am around if you have any more questions, or if you want to talk about it some more. But thank you. Appreciate it.